Good morning, consumer law folks. By now, hopefully, you've read some of the articles. I know some of you overachievers have read quite a few of them, and you may be thinking, oh, all that FL, Fair Labor Standard Act stuff, is history and just something that's already in place and done and finished. That is not true. The Fair Labor Standard Act has a lot to do with current and important laws that still affect all of us today. As a matter of fact, about 3 years ago, they tried to get through a bunch of changes based on whether employees could be categorized as exempt or non-exempt, and the state of Texas struck it down as unconstitutional. There's a lot of political and uh, corporate, I guess, turmoil surrounding the Fair Labor Standards Act that affect all of us even now. So, in a nutshell, here's what you need to understand about what exempt versus non exempt means. When you are employed, your employer will make a decision based on whether you are exempt from the laws in the Fair Labor Standard Act or you are non exempt from those laws in the Fair Labor Standard Act. If you are exempt, it means that some of the laws in that act don't apply to you. If you are non-exempt, the employer has to follow all the laws in the Fair Labor Standard Act. Now, for a long time, employers would want to categorize you as exempt, which means they didn't have to follow the laws in the Fair Labor Standard Act. Laws like number of hours you could work or overtime pay, things like that. Exempt employees typically receive a salary, one set amount of money per week or per paycheck, regardless of how many hours they work. Non-exempt employees get an hourly rate, and if they work more than a certain amount of time, and I'm being broad because states have different regulations, if they work more than a certain amount of hours, they get time and a half. So if you make $10 an hour for the first 40 hours in the week, you'd make $15 an hour if you had to work overtime. Those are all things that are considered part of the Fair Labor Standard Act. Whereas exempt employees, they get a salary, they get one amount of money for the amount of time that they work in a week, and it doesn't matter how many hours that is. So oftentimes, exempt employees are like managers or professionals. Think about, teachers, doctors, lawyers, things like that. They are exempt from those overtime requirements. Now, some employers still do pay overtime, regardless of whether you're exempt or non-exempt, but a lot of employers will categorize people as exempt and then require them to work more than the 40 hours a week. One of the big arguments a few years back was, what about people like managers in fast food restaurants? They may only be making a salary of about, 20, 30,000 a year, but they may be working way more than 40 hours a week to earn that salary. But they don't get overtime because they're a salaried exempt employee. And a lot of people think that that might be a little unfair. So the argument was a few years ago that you had to make a certain amount of money uh, as a salary to be considered exempt, and they raised that amount, but then they backed off, and I'll find a video for you about all the ramifications of that. So a lot of times people think it's a promotion to be considered an exempt employee because it's considered more professional. But oftentimes what ends up happening is because their hourly rate has been taken away, they actually end up making more or making less money per hours worked because there's no limit to how many hours they can be asked to work for that salary. There are very few legitimately exempt employees out there. A lot of people are miscategorized, and that's a big issue in lawsuits that base themselves on the FLSA, whether somebody's been miscategorized as exempt and actually should have been being paid overtime for all their hours worked. So it does impact you, even if it doesn't yet, when you go out into working full time and aren't a student anymore. If you are asked to be an exempt employee, you want to make sure that your salary is commensurate with the amount of work that you're doing, and that it's not just a way to keep you working a whole bunch of hours without giving you that overtime pay that a non-exempt employee would be required to have. So that's all I have for you today. I just want you to know the difference between those two as you're working through your materials, do the end of the week. It was just a thought that I had that I should make clear, because I think, in general, very few people that you run into know the difference between those two things. Everybody who is working full time, or actually everybody who is working, is in one of those two categories and probably has no idea what those categories mean or what it even refers to. They just know they're an exempt employee, or they know they're a non exempt employee, if they even know that, and they don't understand what that exemption means. If you're exempt, it means that your company is exempting itself and you from the laws in the Fair Labor Standard Act. So whether it's a good thing or not, that kind of depends on which side of the table you're sitting on, I guess. So Wednesday, halfway through the month, I hope you guys are all staying safe and taking care of yourselves, and staying dry, although in quarantine, and stay safe at home. I guess the rain matters a little bit less, but it would be nice to have some sunshine. Hopefully that's coming tomorrow. And keep reading those articles. Feel free to reach out and chat. I have my phone with me all the time. I have Teams on my phone, so it comes up. If you have a question or comment, or there's anything I can do to make something easier for you, let me know. I would imagine that this week we'll have some more insight as to how the school year finishes out, but I'm just guessing. I don't know that. I'm just hoping. Maybe it's more a projection. So I hope you're well. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.